And my talk is called Agaves of Northeastern Mexico. And my definition for the purpose of this talk of Northeastern Mexico is the states of Coahuila, Nuevo León, Tamaulipas, and San Luis Potosí. So that's only 4 states out of, I think, 28 in Mexico. But what an amazing assortment of agaves are to be found there. Okay, this is an agave that's not very well known, agave pocherana. I first got acquainted with it when it was on the ISI list back in, I think, the late 70s or early 80s. And so Ruth likes agaves, and she said, well, we got to get one. You know, we don't have this one. So we got it, and it really doesn't blow you away right away when you look at that plant. It's got stiff, sword-like glaucous leaves. It's nice, but maybe nothing to write home about. But after growing for some years, it eventually flowered. And now I think you'll appreciate this as a really special plant. So it grows in Coahuila and also in neighboring Chihuahua. Very cold tolerant. It can take it down to 20 with no trouble. I don't know how much colder. And it is in the subgenus Latea. If you know about the subgenera of agaves, subgenus Latea, like this, has a stalk with no branches on it. And here in the background you see subgenus agave with those branches and the flowers at the end of branches. So the Latean agaves are all over the place in Mexico, as well as the agaves. But this one, I just couldn't believe how packed together the flowers were, and pink is not a common color in agave. But it is interesting that the agaves do have pink flowers, seem to be concentrated in north-central Mexico. Agave polyanthiflora, a little bitty thing with pink flowers. This one, and agave oruensis, which is a big Americana type one, has pink flowers also. So I can't imagine why that's true, but there you go. But in this case, the pink flowers with those brilliant red and yellow stamens, what a stunning effect. I was so excited when this bloomed, I called the newspaper and they sent a photographer out and made the front page of the garden section. There it is in habitat. This was actually taken in Chihuahua, to the west of the area I'm covering in my talk, but I don't have a picture of it in Coahuila. But you can see, like many of the plants, this is in the section marginate of the agaves, many of the plants in this group have this sort of an inflorescence that goes sideways after going up rather than going straight up. So you find this with lechuguilla and lophantha and other plants in the same group. But this is a lot more spectacular than those. Okay, agave parasana. This is one of my favorites. It's named after the town of Parras in southern Coahuila. And we had a plant for many years in the garden. We first got it just labeled agave species Coahuila. And I thought it was the most wonderful thing, and I wanted to go see it in habitat. Eventually I found the name was agave parasana. And so I went on a trip down there with a friend of mine to try to find it in habitat.
I'm absolutely delighted that I was invited to come here and tell you all about what I hope to convince you is a very amazing, fabulous, beautiful, intriguing new cactus for Southern California. It's my great pleasure to introduce you to Cylindra opuntia chuckwallensis, or as we like to call him, the Chuckychoya. The story of the discovery of Cylindra opuntia chuckwallensis began back in spring of 2011 when my esteemed cactus guru, Dr. Mark Baker, and I were working on a rare plant survey south of the Mule Mountains out in northeastern Riverside County. The Mule Mountains are just southwest of Blythe, California, which is right on the California-Arizona border, right where Interstate 10 crosses. The mules are directly east of the Chuckwalla Mountains, which will obviously become important real quick here. But for the purpose of the very beginning of this saga, what was really important was the fact that the Mule Mountains are directly north and adjacent to the Chocolate Mountains aerial gunnery range. As you probably know, the California desert has been used for military training for decades and decades and decades, and so there's all kinds of random military debris out there, including nasty things like UXO, unexploded ordnance, and other things. This survey was for a proposed solar plant, which fortunately did not make it past the permitting process, yay. And the company that we were working for is one of these very large multinational environmental and engineering consulting firms. And so they're very, very safety oriented or liability oriented, as you might call it. And so they figured, since we were working so close to the aerial gunnery range, that in addition to our usual morning talk, is safety talk, where they tell you to drink lots of water and wear sunscreen and don't step on rattlesnakes, that they would hire a couple of UXO specialists to come out and tell us every single morning that we should not touch or pick up things that looked like unexploded bombs or exploded bombs or just anything metal in general, basically. And so we were getting paid good money on this gig. So these guys would come out in their blindingly chartreuse shirts, and we would all stand and stare very, vividly at these things. But as it turned out, for whatever bureaucratic reason, the UXO guys were only allowed to work 6 days a week. Whereas, of course, botanists on a survey work 7 days a week over and over until you can't walk anymore. So the company said, well, we're afraid since the guys can't come out today, we can't let you work today. And we were all kind of taken aback by that. And they said, wait, but before you mutiny, here's the deal. Come up with 8 hours of botanically related work to do, and we'll pay you for it. So not our usual 10 or 12-hour days, but not a bad deal. So that morning we had a meeting, and we got all of our paperwork caught up, and all of our GIS, CNDDB data sheets, got everything caught up, and then we went and had fun. So 5 of us headed out, and we were trucking along the north side of the Chuckwalla Mountains when we started to see this really strange-looking cholla. And Mark Baker said, well, what the heck is that? And we all said, well, Mark, isn't it just Cylindra opuntia echinocarpa? Cylindra opuntia echinocarpa is a very common species, very widespread, and it also has a great deal of morphological variation across its range. And as many of you probably know, if you get rodents getting under the roots of chollas, they'll fall over, they'll reroot, and you can end up with these big, ugly masses of decumbent chollas. So we figured that's just what was going on here. Well, he didn't buy it. He said, no, I don't think that looks like echinocarpa. I think we potentially have something new here. And we all said, okay, whatever, Mark. So we continued our little expedition. And later that afternoon, we were headed towards a place called Chuckwalla Spring, because of course you always find cool stuff in springs. And we walked up through this beautiful little red canyon here and turned the corner. And boom, we managed to find one of these things in flower. This was May 1st, 2011, so it was past the main part of the flowering season. This is the only individual that we found in flower on that day. And so Mark, of course, climbed up and proudly grabbed a few joints, including the flower. And he came down and shoved it smugly in our faces and said, does that look like Cylindra opuntia echinocarpa? And we had to admit it didn't. So we started to believe that maybe we might actually have something new and undescribed here.
Thinking about this, and at this 2015 Cactus and Succulent Society of America convention, they're amazing experts, and we've had wonderful slides and photos, and I've decided I'm going to switch over to other genera, and I'm going to just forget about dudleyas now, because there's so many other beautiful plants. But I'm also thinking about some comments that people made. You know, they're these tremendous experts, and people are feeling like, oh gee, you know, I'm a beginner here. Well, we're all beginners in one aspect or another, and a friend of mine who's an ornithologist is always telling me to, you know, take a time and look at things with fresh eyes. Yesterday I had a little bit of time. I drove up over Glendora Ridge. I hadn't been on one particular road near here, and I might have to tweak a little thing that I had in the Jepson manual. Key about dudleyas is about where something occurs. So if you keep fresh eyes, you're always learning new things. We're all beginners in a lot of ways. So that's one theme is that we're all beginners, and the other is conservation. And I want to talk a lot about a lot of different rare and endangered things. We've got some Dudleya brittonii, not as endangered as some. It looked a little more prolific when it seemed like the highway department spread it all along in the 80s. It was spread all along the roadway there. It looked a little more like it had a bigger distribution. A lot of people like to pair them with something dark. Pretty easy to grow from seed. And they can be with any number of different beautiful agaves and such. So there are a lot of rare Dudleya species. There's so many that I couldn't fit them all into one talk. 8 are federally threatened or endangered. I went through the California Native Plant Society criteria for what's rare and endangered, and I tried to apply that to Baja California too. And maybe 36 or so are rare or endangered in one fashion or another. Dudleya formosa, a beautiful Dudleya. There are a lot of Dudleyas that confuse me and confuse a lot of people, but Dudleya formosa is a wonderful, attractive species. Only grows in one canyon. There's some development above the canyon. People could easily start throwing trash over the sides of the cliff, or dumping their yard waste, and you start getting jade plants or whatever growing on the hillside. It hybridizes in nature with other things. There are some threats to this beautiful Dudleya formosa. Like most Dudleyas, exceptionally easy from seed. Rancho Santa Ana has a plant. I have some plants, and I'm growing up a lot of seedlings of this. Throughout the convention, a lot of people talked about these really rare things, or some of the things that we're excited about. Why are they rare? Sometimes it takes a fresh look to say, okay, well, why is this particular one rare? Is it the substrate chemistry? You see these things with the white quartz or the reddish quartz or the limestone or what have you. How much moisture is around? Is that substrate, is it just a small patch rather than miles and miles and miles? Sometimes with some of these things, we're looking for them, and people were saying, oh yeah, you look on this one hilltop, you find it, and you expect it on the next 10 hilltops, but it's not there. And some really minor aspect of weather, maybe it's the fog, the heat, some places a little more or better protected from frost. Some of these coastal plants. I have some coastal plants. I dumped them in seawater just to play around and see how they would survive. They came out of the seawater and they were still alive, but one of the things I was surprised is all the mealybugs died. But it has to be cold seawater where it's flushing through all of the time. You get a hot bucket of seawater and it kills the plants. But anyway, that might give us a clue. Why are these things growing right next to the coast where there's a lot of salt spray? Well, maybe that's affecting the insects that are eating them. There's a lot going on if we take some time, we do an experiment, or we just pay a little more attention. Maybe part of its history. Either something has recently evolved in that area, or maybe it used to be much more widespread. The climate is changing and it's getting a smaller and smaller range. A lot of different possibilities.